for tampering. In a world driven by fast access and frictionless experiences, the Humble QR code wins on one key aspect: simplicity. No chip, no battery, no wireless connectivity. A simple, low-tech solution connecting our digital and physical worlds. Quiet, square, unassuming, but absolutely everywhere.
The UAS Challenge started in 2015. Loughborough University has been involved since its creation.
We have to build an unmanned aerial system, UAS.
It's a vehicle that's completely controlled from the ground.
To perform a specific task, drop a small box with a parachute attached.
To deliver humanitarian aid, students are able to apply what they learn at university into a real project. You can see it from its very beginning, from a simple sketch all the way into the final competition fly.
Oh, that's not meant to do that. Wait, so what does this do?
The sound of Lincolnshire. BBC Radio Lincolnshire.
Quite a nice day today across Lincolnshire with plenty of sunshine. It is going to stay dry today with temperatures around 21 to 23 degrees and it's 73 Fahrenheit.
As the sun begins to rise, seems a float for words and time. Chemistry spark flies, alchemy goes surprise.
Well, at the comp, I'm living my best life. 6 little tents and a van, and that is our home for 3 days.
Wind comes from our left direction, the wind stays coming from our right.
We want to make sure that the aircraft is ready to pass 2 stages, the scrutineering and the unboxing. We need 4 stickers to be able to do all the process for it. We need the unboxing to be done in less than 6 minutes, fully assembled and ready to fly. Then we have 60 seconds to demonstrate our safety features. Hopefully in the next an hour and a half probably, we'll be able to have all of this ready to go.
Right, let's just lift it up a little bit so you can just see it fall out.
Okay, okay, you do it?
Right, whenever you're ready.
Main issue we had during the unboxing was that when we inserted the payload itself with the parachute, which is the main purpose of the competition, we pulled too tight on one of the cables that became apart, and that single pull meant that one of our tail control surfaces completely had no signal connection.
Setbacks are always present and you have to learn how to deal with them, work together to find a solution to keep moving forward.
Stickers are on, yeah, make that change, and then team leader, go and speak to scheduling when you'll want to fly.
We're gonna fly this one, but we're gonna go and then change all the electronics to put it on that one, technically. We have managed to pass through the scrutineering as well as the unboxing. Anything happens to this aircraft, whether it's due to the high winds that we have right now, we're lucky enough to have another exact replica over there on the bench behind us. There is nothing stopping us from transposing all of the electronics in here to that one.
It's a marvellous competition for these youngsters. They are going to be our future leaders. They've been working at it for at least 7 months before they come to this final venue and they actually get their vehicles up and flying. How marvellous.
Coming to the competition and seeing other teams, it's like, oh, that's really nice, we could do that next year, or oh, that didn't go so well, maybe we should avoid that.
So it's a bit of friendly competitiveness as well as learning from each other.
But like, I haven't seen any other team that looks like ours, so that's a win. The most intense moment is going to be when the plane goes out past the flight line. It's now or never.
So everyone behind me.
Oh, they're all moving back, so probably now's the time to start filming.
Ready?
Lewis, do you want to go and get the pins out the thing? It's almost like the controls just stopped working.
Yeah, you can disconnect that.
Landing is alright. Roughly. She needs to replace a wheel.
Yep.
And you lot said it was a Zod that was going to have its wing ripped off.
Oh, the joint like broke.
It's not a crash, it's a rapid unscheduled disassembly. That's all it is. Thanks everyone for putting the work and the effort into this. The fact that we were standing about a month ago with only the prototype and everyone pulling the all-nighters and with small incidents here and there trying to get this thing working is better than we expected.
I'm quite happy that we haven't flown this and crashed it.
Yeah.
If we have like 3 airframes next year, we can just crash and burn the first one. Maybe crash and burn the second.
You want to do 3 next year?
And then keep the third one.
James wants 5.
It has helped me become more confident in ways, academically but also as a person. I think I'll definitely be coming back next year.
They have proved that they can work as a team, they can produce a machine, design and complete it. This is a terrific, terrific achievement.
Engineering, new things, making things, it can't get better than that.
Yes, yes.
Thousands of people have come here to the centre of Seoul this evening. They have come to celebrate the newly elected president, Lee Jae-myung.
He's been firing rubber bullets at the direction of the crowd, and it shows you just how volatile the situation is.
We're seeing scenes of destruction like this one across Mandalay, and the reality on the ground is there just aren't enough pairs of hands.
Given the scale of the attacks we've seen over the past 48 hours, it doesn't feel like we're in ceasefire territory.
There when the story breaks. BBC News.
Live from London, this is BBC News. The UK's financial regulator estimates the total compensation for motorists missold car finance could be £18 billion. Protesters in Tel Aviv call for the release of hostages as Israel's Prime Minister promises relentless efforts to free the remaining hostages in Gaza after new videos show two still alive but severely emaciated. A fire breaks out at an oil depot in Russia. An official says fragments of a Ukrainian drone had hit an oil tank. The Vatican says 1 million people celebrated Mass with Pope Leo in Rome. The pontiff addressed the crowds in an open-air service that concludes the Jubilee of Youth Festival. And the BBC launches an investigation into alleged drug use by 2 stars of Strictly Come Dancing. Hello, this is BBC News. I'm Catherine Biarahanga. The UK Financial Conduct Authority has announced that it will hold a consultation for a scheme to compensate people who were charged hidden commissions on car loans. Well, with me is our business correspondent, Mark Ashdown. And Mark, just tell us what the FCA has had to say today.
Yeah, hot off the press, this literally, we just got it in the last few minutes. And yes, they've announced they're going to consult on a compensation scheme. This follows that Supreme Court ruling on Friday about motor finance, about how fair or unfair some motor loans were being provided to consumers by lenders and car dealerships. And this could amount to a compensation package, they say, of up to £18 billion. Now, that would mean a large-scale redress scheme. They're going to run through all the details in this consultation, work out those different factors they're going to consider, come up with a scheme they feel is fair to both consumers and the lenders and car dealerships, and then people will be paid that money. It could range from a couple of £100 up to £1,000 or so. Yes,
and Mark, it's important if you could just remind us of the background to this case. Of course, we had a Supreme Court ruling on this just a few days ago.
Yeah, this has been going on for many years now, and the FCA is the regulator in this market. They've been looking at all sorts of car commissions on car finance. But that case you referred to there, that was 3 particular cases, test cases really, that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And while it threw 2 of them out, it upheld another one. They had claimed that they had been unfairly treated. There were commissions on the loans they'd been sold, which they weren't aware of. And it was also claimed that the dealers should have had what's known as a fiduciary duty, so a legal obligation to act in their best interests above their own interests. Now, that was thrown out, but what the court did say, that one case, a chap called Marcus Johnson, who was charged something like 55% commission on his loan, that was too high, too unfair, and there were factors involved with how he was told or not told about it as well. So that's the sort of foundation, if you like, that the FCA are now going to use for this consultation. And by the way, it's a legal obligation. They have to do this. It looks highly likely that a scheme will go ahead now. The consultation will be published in October. They'll take all sorts of information from different parties, draw up a scheme they believe is fair, and then they say they should start paying money out next year.
And the car finance industry is massive in the UK. Just tell us the impacts this scandal has had on the industry.
Yeah, look, make no mistake, it could have been a lot worse for the lenders and by extension the UK economy, to the point where there are estimations it could be on a scale of the PPI mis-selling scandal. Many people will remember from decades ago. That amounted to £50 billion in compensation. There were figures being bandied around that it could be that high if the lenders had lost that case entirely on Friday. So much so that the Treasury and the Chancellor Rachel Reeves tried to intervene to give evidence to the Supreme Court, were also minded to potentially intervene if it had gone gone the other way. Such was the destabilising effect it could have on the UK economy and to the rest of the world in terms of investment into the UK. So I think there's a sigh of relief there that we're not talking sort of 40, 50 billion. Certainly up to 18 billion is a huge amount of money. Just to give a bit of context there, what the FCA has said is they don't think it'd be any lower than 9 billion given the amounts involved and the costs. There are some analyst estimates it could be as high as 18 billion. They don't think it will necessarily get there. Somewhere in the middle is a potential. I put to a source, is 13, 14 billion more likely? They said yes, but it could be higher, it could be lower.
Mark, just very briefly, remind us of the official advice for people who think they might have been impacted.
Yeah, well, look, a lot of people will have gone to court already if they were sort of, upwardly mobile and decided got onto this years ago. Also, people will have been signing up with those claims management firms. There are a good couple of hundred of them on the market. You'll see adverts on social media, on the internet. Now, the advice is do not go near those. Do not sign up with those. This scheme, and they're still deciding the details of it, whether it's, for example, opt-in, opt-out, whether you'll just be told about it or whether you'll have to do anything to register an interest. But certainly they're going to make it easy for people to be told if they've had a loan which is eligible and make it really easy to claim. So the strong advice from the FCA is do not sign up with a claims management company. They can take about 30% in some cases, a cut of any payout you get. Any scheme will be free, you will be told directly, and then you can keep your full compensation.
Mark, thank you. That's our business correspondent, Mark Ashdown there. There's been widespread outrage after Hamas released videos showing 2 Israeli hostages alive but emaciated. The EU Foreign Affairs chief called the videos appalling. Israeli protesters blocked the main Tel Aviv highway during morning rush hour on Sunday, calling for the immediate release of the hostages and the end of the war. While on Sunday night, tens of thousands of people, including the families of hostages, turned out for the weekly rally in Tel Aviv. Israeli media described it as the largest turnout in recent months. Meanwhile, in Gaza, the health ministry says 6 more people have died from starvation and malnutrition as the hunger crisis continues. Israel doesn't allow the BBC and other news organisations to report independently from inside Gaza. So Amir Nada sent us this report from Jerusalem and a warning. It contains images of malnutrition and death that you may find distressing from the very start.
Ibrahim mourns his brother, Atif, 17 years old. He died today after 20 days in hospital, his family say. Until a month ago, he'd never been ill. He developed problems with his nerves, they said, and then malnutrition gripped his body. Outside Shifa Hospital, Atif's father grieved the loss of his son.
He never even had the flu. What happened to him? The same thing that everyone is suffering from. Not enough to eat, not enough to drink. I have nothing else to say.
Humanitarian organisations say Gaza needs to be flooded with aid to reverse an unfolding famine. The UN says Israel is issuing fewer denials, but is still continuing to impede aid getting in. Israeli leaders continue to reject widespread criticism of its restrictions on food entering Gaza. Its foreign ministry saying today that it's only Israeli hostages that are being deliberately starved. Evyatar David looks emaciated in this most recent hostage video. His family want the pictures to be seen, calling it a vile propaganda campaign by Hamas. Today, hostage families called on Israel to return to ceasefire negotiations.
We will not get our children back unless the Israeli government places a real initiative on the table.
US envoy Steve Witkoff is reported to have told hostage families today that Hamas is willing to disarm, causing an immediate denial by the armed group, saying they'll only disarm when a sovereign state of Palestine is established. But in Gaza, people's needs are much more immediate. Palestinians call out hunger and near daily attacks by Israeli troops on people seeking aid, something Israel denies. And they plead for Hamas leaders to return to the table.
Today, everyone is being killed trying to get aid. I tell Khalil al-Hayya to have mercy on your people. You're negotiating for your people and those who put you there.
Ceasefire negotiations remain stalled, but desperation runs ever higher, and those in pain call for the hunger and the war to end. Amir Nada, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has visited the Al-Aqsa compound in Jerusalem and said he prayed there and also called for Israel's sovereignty of the Gaza Strip. This is a violation of a decades-old arrangement covering one of the most sensitive sites in the Middle East. Online pictures show Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has been sanctioned by the UK government, appearing to lead Jewish prayers at the compound, which is known by Jews as the Temple Mount. Under the status quo arrangement, Jews can visit the site but not pray, which Muslims see as a major provocation.
Hamas horror videos came due to one thing. They attempt to create pressure on the state of Israel. And I say, from here of all places, from Temple Mount, we should send a message to make sure we conquer the whole Gaza Strip, announce sovereignty of the whole Gaza Strip, take down every Hamas man and encourage voluntary immigration. Only this way will we return the hostages and win the war.
Our Middle East correspondent Hugo Bashega has more on the minister's visit and what he did.
This is going to be seen as a major provocation by Muslims because of this arrangement around the Al-Aqsa compound, which is known by Jews as the Temple Mount in occupied East Jerusalem, because this arrangement allows Jews to visit the complex but not pray there. And we've seen those images of Itamar Ben-Gvir leading Jewish prayers there earlier today, and he released a video on his social media accounts, again repeating some of his positions. He has been urging the government, the Israeli military, to occupy the whole of the Gaza Strip, and he again talked about this idea of what he described as a voluntary migration of Palestinians from Gaza, which many experts say would amount to the forced displacement of the population and a possible war crime. So obviously Itamar Ben-Gvir is an ultra-nationalist member of the Prime Minister's coalition. He has been sanctioned by the UK government because of his repeated incitements of violence against Palestinian communities in the West Bank, and today he was again sharing his very inflammatory remarks and his controversial positions.
And today the Palestine Red Crescent in Gaza saying that one of its staff members was killed in an Israeli attack on its headquarters in southern Gaza. Just update us on the situation in the territory.
Yeah, so we don't have more details about this incident. Again, the Red Cross there, the Red Crescent, saying that its headquarters in Khan Yunis came under attack, an Israeli attack. The Israeli military has told us that they were not aware of any kind of military activity in that area. But also today, the health ministry in Gaza said 6 more people have died from starvation and malnutrition, which again shows the desperate, catastrophic situation in Gaza because of this humanitarian crisis there. The United Nations saying that still a very limited amount of aid is entering Gaza, and we've seen some chaotic images of crowds, stopping convoys carrying supplies to try to grab some aid that's been delivered by aid organizations and the United Nations. And again, these organizations saying that more needs to be done. They've been urging the Israeli government to lift the restrictions that have been imposed on the entry of supplies into Gaza to try to alleviate the situation there.
And Hugo, protests continuing in Israel, protesters calling for an end to the war and the release of the hostages. Is this pressure having an impact?
Yeah, and more protests have been happening today, and I think there's a lot of anger in Israel following the release of videos with hostages who remain in captivity in Gaza. And today, many of the front pages here had a picture of one of the hostages, Ivdal David, who was seen emaciated, really weak in one of those videos, shocking images of this hostage who was seen, digging a grave in a tunnel, and he said that he believed this was going to be his own grave because of his health condition. Now, this is happening as Steve Witkoff is in Israel. Yesterday, he had a meeting with some of the hostage families in Israel, and apparently he said there is a new deal on the table that would see the end of the war in Gaza, and apparently American and Israeli officials agree that a new approach is needed in these stall negotiations for a ceasefire and hostage release deal with Hamas. They believe that the current approach with phased release of hostages doesn't really work, so there is now the talk of a comprehensive deal that would see all hostages being freed and would also see the end of the war. Now, it's still very difficult to see how this is going to be accepted in Israel. Again, ministers in the government, including Itamar Ben-Gvir, have been against any kind of deal with Hamas. They say that the war must continue, and they have been threatening to quit the coalition government, and this could lead to the collapse of the governing coalition of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And it is also very difficult to see how Hamas is going to accept these demands that are being made in these negotiations. So it shows how difficult, how complex these negotiations are for a deal between Israel and Hamas in Gaza.
Here, the government is working on plans to evacuate some children from Gaza and bring them to the UK for medical treatment. It's unclear how many children might be involved, but it's thought the first evacuations could happen in the coming weeks. The Sunday Times first reported that the UK was looking to bring seriously ill children to the UK. A government spokesman said, "We are taking forward plans to evacuate some children from Gaza who require urgent medical care, including bringing them to the UK for specialist treatment, where that is the best option for their care." Earlier, I spoke to our political correspondent, Damien Grammaticus.
At the minute, only sketchy details. I mean, if you look back, since the start of this conflict, so October 2023, no children have been brought by the government here from Gaza to the UK for medical treatment. The UK has given money, I think £1 million, to agencies in the region who are funding care for children who've been taken out of Gaza, and adults too, being treated in hospitals around. And also a couple of £1 million more for supplies going into Gaza. So what's significant here, I think, is the first time the government is looking to do that. There was criticism not very long ago from Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee about the fact no children had come, and said the government should be doing this. So Keir Starmer came out and said they were working on doing that, and now the government is saying within weeks it's working on this plan. Now, there are some children have been brought out, it's worth saying, by a private organisation, 3 children so far, to have medical treatment in the UK from Gaza.
The trial of the deposed Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has begun in Dhaka, where she's facing charges of crimes against humanity allegedly committed during a mass uprising against her rule last year. Ms. Hasina, who fled to India, is being tried in absentia. She's accused of ordering the use of lethal weapons to target protesters a year ago. More than 800 people were killed in weeks of violence. Ms. Hasina denies the charges and says she has not received any formal legal notices. A massive oil depot fire raging near Russia's Black Sea resort of Sochi has been blamed by Russian authorities on a Ukrainian drone attack. It's part of a series of strikes on Russian military infrastructure over the weekend. In response, Russia has attacked a number of Ukrainian cities, including a missile strike which destroyed homes and civilian infrastructure in Ukraine's southern city of Mykolaiv. With the very latest, here's our World News correspondent, Joe Inwood.
Hearing drones in the sky and gunfire on the ground, residents in the city of Samara start filming. When a fuel tank at an oil refinery is hit. This was one of several Ukrainian drone strikes launched over the weekend, targeting installations across the south of Russia. A massive fire was also caused at an oil depot near the Black Sea resort of Sochi, causing nearby flights to be cancelled.
I want to express my gratitude for our special long-range operations on Russian territory. Their impact is significant, and each of them is tangible for the enemy, and our operations will continue. Russia is dragging out the war, so it will receive just responses.
Overnight, Russia launched its own attacks, as it often has, hitting Ukrainian cities. This was Mykolaiv in the south, where homes and civilian infrastructure was destroyed. Local authorities say at least 7 people were injured in this frontline city, so often the target of Russian fire. Just to the southeast, Kherson was also hit. Authorities say a bridge across the Dnipro River was badly damaged and urged residents to evacuate. It comes at the end of a particularly deadly week for Ukraine, including an attack on Kyiv that killed 31 people. President Trump has set a deadline of Friday for Vladimir Putin to end the war. That looks as far away as ever. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Weather warnings have been upgraded to amber for most of Scotland as Storm Floris bears down on the UK. The amber warnings will last from 10 a.m. on Monday through to 10 p.m. on Monday night. There is also a yellow warning across Northern England, North Wales and Northern Ireland from 6 a.m. on Monday through to midnight. Well, I'm now joined by BBC weather presenter Ben Rich. And Ben, how unusual is it to have a storm in the middle of the summer?
Well, this is certainly something we would be more expecting to talk about in the autumn as opposed to in the summer, as you say, in August. This is a weather event that is taking place and is not that common, I have to say, at this time of year. We can take a look at what's going on. We have that amber warning from the Met Office. It covers central southern parts of Scotland. And the idea of 80 to 90 mile per hour wind gusts, this would be a significant storm in the winter. The fact that it's coming in the summer, that will only make it more disruptive. And this is something we'd expect to see in the autumn as well. A powerful jet stream high up in the atmosphere, picking up an area of cloud, that shield of cloud you can see on that image there, and the jet stream interacting with that weather system is going to deepen an area of low pressure. And you can see on this sequence that low is just deepening, more and more lines surrounding the centre of that low. It looks like a dartboard essentially, and that shows us that we have a storm that really does mean business. It is those central and northern parts of Scotland covered by that amber warning, with those gusts in exposed places 80 to 90 miles per hour, but generally 50 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts. We've got the Edinburgh Fringe Festival going on, for example, at the moment. A lot of events taking place at this time of year. That's one of the things that makes this situation potentially so disruptive. But as you can see there, also parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England, North Wales covered by those yellow warnings. So a very windy day to come across all parts of the UK.
And just remind us, what do these weather warnings mean?
Well, the weather warnings are issued by the Met Office, the UK's weather forecaster, and there are 3 tiers of warnings. There are yellow warnings, amber warnings and red warnings, and what we have now is obviously an amber warning. So that is a warning of a risk to property, a risk to life to an extent. Certainly the risk to journeys. So if you're making a journey, travel disruption is going to be very, very likely. Any sort of outdoor events. So it's really telling people to take precautions, to maybe change travel plans, to keep up to date with the weather forecast, to check on vulnerable people, because this is a weather event that, yes, really could mean business.
And Ben, very briefly, how much of this is down to climate change?
Well, there are certain weather events that can be very much attributed to climate change. So heat waves, flooding, for example, these are things that we know are becoming more intense and more frequent. Windstorms like this, actually, the jury is out to an extent. There are some areas of research that suggest the jet stream is going to be strengthened by climate change. That gives the potential for stronger storms. But then there are other bits of research that suggest actually the jet stream may weaken, may bend around the map a little bit more, and we may see slightly less windy weather like this. So it's one of those things where scientists are still working on that.
Indeed. Ben, thank you. That's our weather presenter, Ben Rich there. A volcano in far eastern Russia has erupted for the first time in more than 500 years, which experts say may be linked to last week's massive earthquake. The volcano in Kamchatka threw up a 6-kilometre high ash plume overnight. Hours later, another large earthquake in Russia led to tsunami warnings in 3 areas of the peninsula. Both events may be connected to a massive 8.8 magnitude earthquake, which hit a similar area last week, which sparked tsunami warnings as far away as French Polynesia and Chile. The BBC has launched an investigation into alleged drug use by two Strictly Come Dancing stars. The move follows reports in the national newspaper alleging cocaine use by the stars who have not been named. According to The Sun on Sunday, the allegations were made in a legal submission to the BBC in March by law firm Russells on behalf of Wyn Evans, a former celebrity contestant on the show. Our arts correspondent Noor Nanji has been following developments.
Well, this story was first reported by The Sun on Sunday, and as you say, the stars involved have not been named. But according to The Sun newspaper, this alleged cocaine use by these two stars was widely discussed on the show. And it also says the claims relating to this alleged drug use were made on behalf of Wyn Evans, a former contestant himself on the show, in a legal submission to the BBC back in March. Now, we understand the BBC has now launched an investigation into all of this, which it is leading, and that it's also engaged an external law firm to help with that. But all of this is a further blow to Strictly Come Dancing. The show has been on air for more than 20 years, but in the past year it's been rocked by multiple controversies relating to the behaviour of some of its professional dancers and also celebrity contestants. Now, in response to these latest developments, the BBC said it has clear policies and protocols in place to deal with serious complaints. It also encouraged anyone with concerns to speak up and said that it wouldn't be appropriate for it to say anything further at this stage. Wyn Evans, for his part, has not responded to a request for comment from BBC News. You may recall that he left his BBC radio show earlier this year, and that's after he apologised for making an inappropriate comment on the Strictly Live tour.
And that was our arts correspondent Noor Nanji with the latest on that story. Now, if you're a cats lover, then Hong Kong could be the place for you. Thousands of people have descended on the island for a feline festival. Pet owners can get their paws on everything from premium cat food to paw imprint jewellery and fur shampoo. The event also includes grooming guides to help people learn to properly pamper their furry friends. There's even a cat competition with judges flying in from around the world to pick the Mogi with the most styles. You're watching BBC News with me, Catherine Biarahanga. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly with all the very latest global headlines.
Now on BBC News, Yotam Ottolenghi on his journey from academia to culinary fame and the power of food. Influential with Catty Kane.
You know, you've become an adjective. I mean, like I go to dinners and people say, oh, that's very Ottolenghi.
Yeah, it's very weird because at the end of the day, I'm just me.
Yotam, you grew up in Jerusalem with parents who were both educators. What was their expectation of what you were going to do in life?
They didn't tell me what their expectations were, but there was a quiet expectation that I would probably become an academic. I don't remember having a conversation which must have happened. What do you want to be when you grow up? I don't remember that. But I'm sure that I would have answered something along the lines of what my parents were doing, like a university teacher, academia, something along those lines. But I haven't committed to that, but it was like inertia. You know, I went to university, I studied, I did an MA, and it was just the expected thing for me.
Was food important in your home growing up?
Yeah, food was very important. We had good ingredients, good cooking. Both my parents were good cooks.
So they both cooked, your mum and your dad?
Yeah, in actual fact, my father used to cook a lot because he worked more flexible hours. So often when we'd come home from school around lunchtime, he would do the cooking. My mother was a head teacher at a school. So she was not at home that much, so he did much of the cooking. She also cooked, but he cooked even more.
Did you cook too with them when you were a kid?
Not as much as other people that have become chefs told me. You know,
you don't have this kind of idyllic Yotam Ottolenghi now memorial of cooking at the age of 5 and knowing it was destined to be.
No, I wasn't a Mozart. I used to play a bit, like my kids, I've got a 9-year-old, 11-year-old, they play, you know, right. So they go in the kitchen and they make an omelet and this and that, regardless of the consequences, or if anyone's hungry, I call it cooking as play. So I used to do a bit of that, but I wasn't like obsessive about cooking. My parents got me a cookbook for children when I was quite young, and I remember that when I got the book, I spent quite a lot of time cooking from that book, and I did like simple things. We had like a kosher version of sausage roll. It was called Moses in the Basket. God knows why. It sounds sinister. I don't know where that came about.
So you're eating poor Moses and his basket.
Yeah. So it was like a chicken sausage inside a pastry. Weird, but there were some memorable recipes from that book that I remember that I used to cook when I was growing up. But most of the time, I just wanted to play outside with my friends.
You were very academic, right? I mean, you got into a gifted program at university, you did your master's, you contemplated doing a PhD. Did you always kind of feel, was there part of you that was thinking this isn't what I want, that you were missing something? Did you know all along that it wasn't quite the right track?
Yes, I've suffered from an imposter syndrome when I was at university, so I did do well. So I realized that I had a skill and a talent for this, for whatever that was, you know, having
literature.
The literature and philosophy. I was studying philosophy or art philosophy, and I could handle a serious conversation and write. But I didn't have the curiosity that some of my other fellow students had. Like, they've been reading Wittgenstein since they were like 15, and I have just come across him the first time when I joined university. So I felt like an imposter in that sense, that I haven't done the work. I've just kind of landed there because I had certain talent. And I enjoyed my time at university, but I also find it very isolating. The conversation was being held amongst a group of like 4 people, you know, like groundbreaking stuff, but actually nobody was participating. You know, there was myself and my supervisor and maybe two more people that were actually interested in such an esoteric subject as you know, I was dealing with the ontological status of photographs, like whatever that means to normal people.
I actually don't even know
what does it
mean
mean to represent the world in a photograph? Right. What's the meaning of that? What is the relationship with the object and what it represents? So I just felt isolated isolated like that. I thought it sounds a bit megalomaniac. I said I wanted a bigger audience. I didn't think I wanted a bigger audience. What I thought I wanted is a conversation with which more people actually understand. And food is kind of the exact opposite of the spectrum. Food is a language that everybody understands.
But where did that, so how did you make the jump for you from that very specific conversation? My daughter did a PhD, and I know exactly what you mean. It's very, very slim, the people that are interested in what you're doing and that understand what you're doing, to food, because it could have been almost anything else. I mean, I can understand the loneliness of academia, but then why food?
Yeah, it's a valid question. So I actually I spent time in journalism. So I used to work for an Israeli paper called Haaretz, and it's a left-leaning daily publication. And I used to work on the news desk for about 3 or 4 years. I used to edit the news items and put them on the page. And it was a job that I really enjoyed, because I'm very into current affair and politics and the world around me. And I enjoyed the hectic and the madness of the newsroom, which was what we have. So everybody was smoking. It's like an old school kind of all big chunky computers with green letters, and you get the news comes and you have the deadline of 10 or 11 o'clock where the morning paper has to be wrapped up. And I loved that. I loved being there. I loved doing that. And it could have been my career, I suppose, had I not. But then what happened was I left Israel in November 1995. This was the year that the Prime Minister Rabin was assassinated. And I was going to go away for a year to just have fun in Amsterdam. And I ended up living in Amsterdam for 2 years and kind of forgetting about Israel and finding, enjoying life in Europe, and actually not doing that much, going out a lot.
And cooking?
And cooking a bit. Yeah, I cooked more. I started cooking more when I was in Amsterdam. And somehow I thought, like, okay, so I did think that if I ever go back to Israel, I'd probably go back to journalism rather than academia, because it felt like there's more there for me. But then I came to London and I went to the Cordon Bleu. And
were you nervous about telling your parents that you were switching from the kind of path that you were on, the master's track, the PhD track, to taking this leap of faith and going to Cordon Bleu?
I want to say I wasn't nervous, but obviously I was nervous because I didn't even have the guts to tell them over the phone. I had to send them a letter, because when I finished my master's dissertation, which was this thick document that, as I said, nobody read, I sent to them in the post, the printed edition, and then I wrote. There was a letter hidden inside saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm taking a year off academia. I'm not going to the States for a PhD. I'm going to go learn how to cook."
So it wasn't just that you sent them a letter, you hid the letter inside the thesis.
Yeah, exactly. And my father called me immediately and he said to me, and I have to say in the best possible way, because he was a very kind, gentle person, but also very clear-minded about his values. And he said to me, "I think you're making the most stupid mistakes that you can make. You know, like you're throwing away your career and your talent and what you've got going for you. And for what? You know, for what? What's that? What are you going to do? Are you going to cook for people?" He was a different generation. You know, now he would have been 90 years old. So for him, the people who cook are the people who cook for you. I mean, the irony is that he loved cooking himself, but he would never thought that was a respectable job. And he didn't think it was a respectable job for me either.
Did he see your success?
Yes, he did see my success, yeah, he did. And he was very proud. And he was also humble enough to tell me that he got it all wrong. You know, he said to me once on my birthday when I turned 40, he said to me, you know, I can't wish you anything. The only thing I can wish you is never to listen to me ever again, because obviously I don't make the right decisions for you. I don't have the right ideas for you.
It's very sweet.
It was very sweet. And even when he did object, he didn't object in the kind of, I'm going to cut you out kind of way. You know, he just really felt very emotional about it. And he felt like, I really want you to understand what you're getting yourself into. And now, being a father, I understand that sentiment very well. When you see a kid about to make a mistake and you just want to save them from making that mistake, and without realizing that you have to make mistakes, you know, that's just part of growing up.
You wait, it doesn't get any easier.
I know,
Your kids
I know.
get older and they make bigger mistakes and it gets more terrifying. So you move to London and you do your Cordon Bleu and then you finish that and eventually you end up opening your own store, kind of taking another leap of faith. At what stage did you realize you'd become successful?
So in 2002, I opened the Ottolenghi Cafe deli or shop in Notting Hill with Noam Bar, one of my business partners, and Sami Tamimi, who's another one of my business partners, and Cornelia Stoibli. We're 4 active partners. And it was quite clearly a success right from the word go. I didn't know how big a success, but I remember the first Saturday after we've opened, so I think we opened on a weekday, but on the Saturday there was a massive queue around the corner of people that really wanted to try our food, the cakes that we made and the salads and everything that we made. And it was obviously before social media or any of those ways of spreading the word out. So it was very, very much a word of mouth kind of thing. And there was a ton of people wanting to come and try the food, and it all happened quite organically. And I was very shocked, but also very ill-equipped to deal with that. So we just ran out of food, and the sales assistant started crying because the customers were rude, and we obviously had no idea what we were doing. It was a good trauma to have. It was a little bit traumatic because we were very unprepared for this moment. And in 2006, I started writing for The Guardian newspaper in London, and I think then it became more of a phenomenon. Rather than just being a local shop in Notting Hill that the local knows, it became more national and then global through my column in The Guardian, which was literally a very small column at the time. It was one tiny recipe with a small picture, but it had a certain impact. And that was kind of it became clear that there's something there.
And when you wrote your first cookbook off the back of that Guardian column, which was Ottolenghi, what did you want it to be? Did you have a kind of clear vision of what you were trying to do with the
No. So the book, the Ottolenghi cookbook, it came out in 2008, and Sami and I wanted to share with the world the recipes that we were selling in our shops. And my agent Felicity Rubinstein, who lived around the corner, used to get all her meals from us right from the start. And she said, like, you guys should write a book because this is the food that people would love to cook at home. She said that quite before the book was published, but Noam was actually quite arrogant and said, oh, but it can't be a conventional cookbook. It needs to be very special. And so for about 2 years, we were thinking of like how to write a cookbook without recipes and without food in it. We had all sorts of weird ideas. It sounds very presumptuous, but she was pushing for a normal cookbook.
with actual recipes
with actual
that people
recipes.
could follow.
And then I had the Guardian column, and then immediately there was quite a lot of interest from different publishers to publish a cookbook of the recipes from the deli, from our cafe in London, and it was pretty special in the sense that people realized that there is this some kind of magic going on with the cakes and pastries and the salads that were kind of mirroring each other and were presented it had a visual language that people haven't seen before. The vertical presentation of food, very fresh food with lots of flavors and really kind of quite dramatic to the eye, but also to the palate, with all the herbs and spices. And we published the book, but it was only going to be one book because it was going to be the book in which we give the world the recipes for the food that we sell. But it was so popular that then publishing became a thing. So rather than just being a book to sell and share, the publishing arm of Ottolenghi became the dog was wagging the tail in this respect. The books became the main thing almost.
Do you have a favorite? I mean, that's probably like choosing a favorite child, but do you have a book of yours that you think that's it, that's what Ottolenghi at its very best?
I'm kind of tempted to say Jerusalem because it tells the story of Sammy and myself and our upbringing and background.
There's a lovely bit in the introduction, and I'm going to butcher it, but you write about breaking bread together, and you say, we're not naive enough to think that this is going to be the solution to problems, but there is something about community and breaking bread together. Do you think that accounts in part for how incredibly successful and popular you've become with your books, with your cafes? And I do hope you're going to open one in Washington soon, where I live. But just with everything that you're doing, do you think there is something in the more fragmented and isolated we become, the more we want to get back to doing something so...
I can't take credit for any of this. I would say that the restaurants, cafes, cookbooks, all those places that we go to, an object that we go to eat and make food, have really changed quite a lot over the last 15 years. Rather than pushing us to explore new grounds and turning us into like competitive sports people around food, they're actually taking us in and offering us something which is much more comfortable and joyful than they used to be. So the big heavy coffee table books that show you a piece of world that is never going to be yours, but you can aspire to, or the restaurants where you've got a million courses coming your way and you're going to look at your clock and say, when can I run out of these? I think these are much less representative of the world we live in. I think people are going into restaurants and into their own kitchens in order to find things that are much more familiar, much more comforting, much more easy to digest. The big dinner party